Leave my home. Adrian's voice sliced through the penthouse, his gray eyes blazing as he faced Lauren, the manager who dared to banish Mariah, the woman who brought light to his silent world. Welcome to a story of love, courage, and triumph that will grip your heart. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and let us know. What do you think happens next? Will Mariah crumble under prejudice, or is a seismic twist coming? Stick around. This tale will surprise you. Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest stories of resilience and change, and share this journey with your friends. Mariah, a radiant black housekeeper, transforms a billionaire's cold home but faces venomous bias. Can her love for a mute boy and his grieving father overcome elite scorn? Comment your guesses below and join us to uncover the truth. The penthouse atop San Francisco's skyline was a monument to wealth and solitude, its glass walls framing the restless waves of the Pacific under a bruised April sky. Adrian Whitaker, a 42-year-old tech billionaire, had sculpted this fortress of sleek marble and steel, where every surface gleamed with the cold precision of his empire, Whitaker Dynamics. The air inside was sterile, heavy with the scent of polished wood and unspoken grief. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast sharp shadows across minimalist furniture. Angular sofas, a glass coffee table, a digital clock ticking in relentless silence. This was no home. It was a mausoleum, its opulence a mask for the void. Within, Adrian moved through the space like a ghost, his tall frame clad in a tailored charcoal suit, his gray eyes sharp but hollow, etched with lines of exhaustion. His jaw, once softened by love, was now a hard line of resolve carved by 10 years of mourning. His wife, Hannah, had slipped away during childbirth, leaving him with their son, Noah, and a heart too shattered to mend. Her absence lingered in the penthouse's quiet corners, in the untouched nursery, in the photographs Adrian kept locked in a drawer. He buried himself in work, boardrooms, algorithms, acquisitions, building an empire that Forbes valued at $12 billion. Yet it couldn't fill the silence she left behind. His days blurred into nights, his BlackBerry buzzing with emails, his voice clipped in meetings, his life a relentless march to outrun pain. Noah, now 9, was a shadow of his mother's memory, with her soft auburn curls and his father's guarded gaze. His small hands clutched a sketch pad, its pages filled with drawings of stars, trees, and a faceless woman he couldn't name. Diagnosed with selective mutism at 5, Noah hadn't spoken a word. His world was confined to pencil strokes and the penthouse's cold walls. Nannies came and went, their starched uniforms and impatient sighs no match for his silence. They fed him, dressed him, but never saw him. Not the way a child needed. A child craved. Adrian, consumed by his empire, left Noah to their care. His rare moments at home were marked by awkward glances and a hand ruffling Noah's hair before retreating to his study. The boy's eyes followed his father, yearning for a connection that never came. The penthouse's grandeur only deepened its emptiness. A digital ticker in the living room scrolled stock prices, its green glow mocking the absence of warmth. A single orchid in a crystal vase stood on the dining table, its petals wilting untouched. The kitchen, with its stainless steel appliances, hadn't known laughter or the clatter of shared meals. Noah's bedroom, though filled with toys, a model rocket, a glowing globe, felt like a museum, each item pristine, unloved. At night, the city's lights winked through the windows, their vibrance a cruel contrast to the stillness inside. Adrian would stand by the glass, a whiskey in hand, staring at the horizon, his reflection a stranger's face. Noah, curled in bed, clutched his sketch pad, drawing the same faceless woman, her outline a quiet plea. The staff moved like automatons, their efficiency a silent hum. Lauren Palmer, the penthouse's manager, ruled with a sharp tongue and sharper ambition. In her 40s, her blonde bob was immaculate, her designer heels clicking with authority across the marble floors. She oversaw cleaners, chefs, and nannies, her clipboard a scepter, her eyes cold with unspoken envy. Lauren harbored a quiet longing for Adrian, her professionalism a veneer for dreams of a life beyond her role. She cataloged his habits: black coffee at dawn, late-night calls to Hong Kong, hoping for a glance that never came. To her, Noah was a duty, his silence a nuisance, his sketch pad a childish distraction. She'd snap at him to sit still, her voice cutting through the boy's fragile world. The penthouse's routine was a clockwork of isolation. Mornings began with Adrian leaving before dawn, his briefcase a shield against the home he couldn't face. Noah ate alone, a nanny hovering, her eyes on her phone. School was a private tutor in a sterile study room where Noah's pencils scratched in silence, his answers perfect but voiceless. Afternoons found him in the living room, sketching by the window, the city's pulse a world he couldn't touch. Evenings were the loneliest. Adrian's car pulling in past midnight, Noah already asleep, the penthouse dark save for the ticker's glow. Lauren would linger, her reports to Adrian brisk, her smile forced, her heart aching for more. Yet, change was stirring in spring. A new housekeeper was hired, a decision Lauren made with a dismissive wave, expecting another faceless worker. The agency promised someone reliable, unassuming. No one anticipated Mariah Simmons, a 33-year-old black woman whose presence would unravel the penthouse's silence. Her resume was brief, odd jobs, a community college degree, but her hazel eyes, warm and steady, held stories of resilience. She arrived on a Monday, her navy dress simple but elegant, her long, glossy hair cascading in waves, her dark skin radiant against the marble's pallor. She carried a worn canvas bag, its contents a mystery. Her smile, a quiet defiance of the penthouse's gloom. Mariah stepped through the glass doors, her footsteps soft but deliberate, her gaze sweeping the space not with awe but with curiosity. Noah, perched on the staircase, watched her, his sketchpad forgotten. Lauren, clipboard in hand, barked instructions: dust the shelves, scrub the floors, her tone laced with condescension. Mariah nodded, her expression serene, but her eyes caught Noah's, and she offered a small wave. He froze, then ducked his head, a faint flush on his cheeks. Adrian, in his study, didn't notice her arrival, his focus on a merger call, his voice a low drone. The penthouse held its breath, unaware that Mariah's warmth was about to seep into its cracks, that her presence would challenge its silence, that a spark had landed in a world long darkened by grief. The penthouse, a glass and marble fortress atop San Francisco's skyline, seemed to exhale as Mariah Simmons began her work in April. Her presence was a quiet rebellion against its sterile chill. Her navy dress, a soft contrast to the hard edges of wealth. At 33, Mariah's beauty was a force. Her dark skin glowing under the LED lights, her long glossy hair cascading in waves, her hazel eyes carrying a warmth that could thaw even the coldest rooms. Her canvas bag, worn but sturdy, held cleaning supplies and a small notebook, its pages filled with recipes and scribbled lyrics from her grandmother's spirituals. Sometimes she felt the weight of every unfinished degree and every doubt that she didn't belong here, among polished marble and people who had never worried about rent. She moved with purpose, her footsteps light on the marble floors, her humming a faint melody that drifted through the penthouse's silent halls. Noah, the 9-year-old boy with his mother's curls and his father's guarded eyes, watched her from the shadows. His sketchpad, ever present, lay open on the staircase, its pages cluttered with stars and trees. But now a new figure emerged, a woman with flowing hair, her face half drawn. Mariah's first day had been a blur of Lauren's sharp orders: scrub the counters, dust the shelves. But she noticed Noah's quiet gaze, his small frame hunched as if bracing against the world. She didn't push, didn't pry. Instead, she knelt by the kitchen counter, her smile soft. "Want to help me make something sweet?" she asked, her voice a velvet invitation. Noah hesitated, his pencil pausing, then nodded, sliding off the stairs, his sketch pad tucked under his arm. In the kitchen, Mariah transformed the sterile space into a canvas of warmth. She pulled flour and sugar from the pantry, her hands deft as she measured ingredients for chocolate chip cookies. Noah stood beside her, his eyes wide. His small fingers clutching a wooden spoon, Mariah guided his hands to knead the dough. Her touch patient, her laughter a ripple that broke the penthouse's silence. "You're a natural, Noah," she said, dusting flour from his nose. He didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed, his gaze fixed on her with a trust he'd never offered the nannies. The oven's warmth filled the room, the scent of baking cookies curling through the air like a promise. For the first time, the kitchen felt alive, its steel surfaces softened by Mariah's care. At night, when the city's lights glittered beyond the glass walls, Mariah found Noah curled in his bedroom, his sketch pad open to a new drawing, a plate of cookies, her hand beside it. She sat on the edge of his bed, her hair spilling over her shoulders, and sang a lullaby. Swing low, sweet chariot, her voice low and soulful, wrapping him in a cocoon of comfort. Noah's eyes fluttered, his small hand reaching for hers, his silence no longer a barrier but a bridge. She stayed until he slept, his breathing steady, his sketchpad slipping to the floor. The penthouse, once a tomb, began to hum with her presence. Fresh towels folded with care, a vase of daisies on the dining table, her humming echoing in the halls. Lauren, the penthouse's manager, watched Mariah with narrowing eyes. Her blonde bob gleamed under the chandeliers, her heels clicking with irritation as she scribbled on her clipboard. Mariah's warmth was an affront to her control, her ease with Noah a threat to her carefully curated order. "Don't get too comfortable," Lauren snapped one afternoon, her voice cutting as Mariah polished a glass table. "You're here to clean, not play nanny." Mariah nodded, her expression serene, but her hazel eyes flickered with resolve. She wouldn't be cowed. Not when Noah's quiet trust was at stake. Lauren's envy simmered, her glances sharp, but Mariah's focus remained on the boy, her every action a defiance of the penthouse's cold rules. Adrian, the billionaire father, was a fleeting shadow in these early days, his life tethered to boardrooms and late-night calls. Yet even he noticed subtle shifts. Returning past midnight, he found a plate of cookies on the counter, a note in Mariah's neat handwriting. "For Noah, but save one for you." The gesture pierced his guarded heart, a reminder of a warmth he'd buried with his wife. One evening he paused in the hallway, hearing Mariah's laughter as she and Noah built a pillow fort in the living room. The fort, a chaotic sprawl of cushions and blankets, was a rebellion against the penthouse's sterile order. Noah, usually withdrawn, giggled as Mariah crowned him king of the fort, her hair catching the light like a halo. Adrian lingered unseen, his chest tight with a feeling he couldn't name. Mariah's warmth seeped into every corner. She hung Noah's drawings on the fridge, their colors a stark contrast to the steel. She left a trail of small acts, fresh coffee brewing for Adrian, a repaired seam in Noah's favorite jacket, a hummed melody that lingered long after she'd left a room. Noah followed her like a shadow, his sketch pad now filled with her image, her hair, her smile, her hands shaping dough. One afternoon, as they planted herbs in small pots on the balcony, Mariah taught him their names: basil, thyme, rosemary, her voice a gentle guide. Noah's fingers dug into the soil, his eyes bright, his silence softening under her care. The penthouse was changing, its cold edges blunted by Mariah's touch. The digital ticker still scrolled, but its glow seemed dimmer against the daisies on the table. Lauren's clipboard felt heavier, her authority challenged by a housekeeper who refused to be invisible. Noah's world, once confined to pencil and paper, was expanding. His trust in Mariah, a fragile but growing flame. Adrian, though distant, felt the stirrings of something new, a crack in his armor. Mariah, with her canvas bag and quiet strength, was no mere housekeeper. She was a tide reshaping a home that had forgotten how to live. The San Francisco penthouse, bathed in the golden haze of a June evening, held its breath as Mariah Simmons stood at the kitchen counter, her hands dusted with flour. The marble surfaces, once cold and clinical, now bore the marks of her warmth. Smudges of butter, a scattering of sugar granules, the faint scent of vanilla lingering in the air. Mariah, at 33, was a vision of quiet radiance, her dark skin glowing under the soft kitchen lights, her long glossy hair tied loosely, strands slipping free as she worked. Her navy dress, simple yet elegant, hugged her frame, and her hazel eyes sparkled with a joy that seemed to defy the penthouse's lingering gloom. Her canvas bag rested on a stool, its contents spilling slightly, a recipe card, a pencil, a worn notebook filled with her grandmother's songs. Noah, the 9-year-old boy with his mother's soft curls and his father's guarded gaze, stood beside her, his small hands clutching a wooden spoon. His sketch pad lay abandoned on the counter, its open page showing a half-finished drawing of Mariah, her hair a cascade of pencil strokes. For weeks, Mariah had woven herself into his silent world, her laughter and gentle touches coaxing him from the shadows. Tonight, they were making a chocolate cake, a simple recipe she'd promised would be their secret masterpiece. The kitchen, usually a sterile expanse of steel, hummed with life, bowls clinking, the oven ticking as it warmed. Mariah's soft humming, a melody that curled around them like a warm blanket. As she chopped strawberries for the frosting, her humming deepened into a song, her voice rising in a soulful rendition of Amazing Grace. The notes were rich velvet, smooth, carrying the weight of her grandmother's kitchen in Mississippi, where she'd first learned the hymn. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch. Noah's voice, though faint, echoed in her heart, a sound she'd prayed for since she first saw his silent sketches. For an instant she wondered if she deserved this, if a woman with a past full of mistakes and doubts could ever be someone's safe place. But then she looked at him and knew she already was. She rocked him gently, her hair brushing his cheek, her song now a soft hum as if afraid to break the spell. Noah's hands gripped her dress, his sketch pad forgotten, his world no longer confined to pencil and paper but alive with sound. With her. Adrian Whitaker, the billionaire father, stepped into the penthouse, his briefcase heavy in his hand. The day had been a blur of boardroom battles, his charcoal suit creased, his gray eyes shadowed with fatigue. He paused in the doorway, drawn by the unfamiliar sound, a child's voice, small but clear, intertwined with Mariah's. His heart, long encased in grief, stuttered. He set his briefcase down, its thud muffled by the carpet, and moved silently toward the kitchen. There, framed by the warm light, he saw Mariah and Noah, her arms around his son, their faces radiant with a shared miracle. Noah's voice, singing the hymn's refrain, pierced Adrian like a blade, sharp and healing. He leaned against the wall unseen, his chest tight with a feeling he thought he'd buried with his wife. Mariah's tears glistened as she smiled at Noah, her voice steadying as she joined him, their duet a fragile harmony. I once was lost, but now am found. The words hung in the air, a testament to the bond they'd forged. The penthouse, for so long a tomb of silence, pulsed with life, its glass walls reflecting their shared joy. Adrian's hand trembled, his fingers brushing the doorway, his grief cracking under the weight of his son's voice. Mariah's presence, her song, her love had done what years of nannies and tutors couldn't. She'd reached Noah, unlocking a door Adrian had thought sealed forever. The moment stretched, sacred and unbroken, the kitchen a cocoon of warmth. Mariah wiped her tears, her laughter soft as she kissed Noah's forehead. "You're my little singer," she said, her voice thick with pride. Noah's eyes shone, his silence shattered, his trust in her absolute. Adrian, still in the shadows, felt the stirrings of something new, a gratitude that bordered on reverence, a warmth that threatened to thaw his frozen heart. The penthouse, once a monument to loss, was shifting, its silence broken by a song that promised healing, a song that belonged to Mariah. The San Francisco penthouse, its glass walls reflecting the amber glow of a June sunset, seemed to soften as evening settled over the Pacific. The air, once heavy with silence, now carried the faint scent of roasted chicken and rosemary, a warmth that felt foreign in the sterile expanse of Adrian Whitaker's home. The dining room, with its long mahogany table and solitary orchid, was no longer a relic of isolation, but a stage for something new. Mariah Simmons, the 33-year-old housekeeper whose presence had begun to unravel the penthouse's gloom, stood in the kitchen. Her navy dress dusted with flour, her long glossy hair tied loosely, strands catching the light. Her dark skin glowed with a quiet radiance, her hazel eyes bright with purpose, as she arranged a platter of food, her hands moving with the grace of someone who understood care as an art. Adrian, the 42-year-old billionaire whose life had been a fortress of grief, had made a decision that broke the penthouse's unspoken rules. Tonight, he'd invited Mariah to dine with them, a gesture unthinkable for the parade of nannies and staff who'd come before. The weight of Noah's voice, heard just hours ago, still lingered in his chest, a crack in the armor he'd worn since his wife's death. He stood at the dining room's edge, his charcoal suit slightly rumpled, his gray eyes softer than usual, watching Mariah as she carried the platter to the table. Noah, the 9-year-old boy with his mother's curls and his father's guarded gaze, sat in his chair, his sketch pad open to a drawing of Mariah, now labeled Mariah Mama in shaky crayon. The table was set simply, white plates, a pitcher of water, a basket of rolls Mariah had baked that afternoon. She moved with ease, her presence a quiet rebellion against the penthouse's formality. As she sat, Noah scooted closer, his small hand brushing hers, his eyes bright with a trust that made Adrian's throat tighten. Mariah cut Noah's chicken into small pieces, her fingers deft, her smile warm as she teased, "Got to eat all this to be king of the fort again, okay?" Noah giggled, a sound still new, his fork clumsy but eager. Adrian watched, his usual silence softened by the scene. His fork paused as Mariah's laughter filled the room, a melody that rivaled the hymn that had broken Noah's silence. The dinner was a revelation. Mariah's stories of her grandmother's peach cobbler, of summers catching fireflies in Mississippi, wove a tapestry of warmth. Noah listened, rapt, his giggles punctuating her words, his sketchpad forgotten. Adrian, usually a man of clipped responses, found himself leaning in, his lips twitching into a rare smile as Mariah described a childhood prank involving a runaway chicken. The penthouse, so long a tomb, pulsed with life, the chandelier's light catching Mariah's hair like a halo. Lauren, the manager, hovered at the room's edge, her blonde bob stiff, her clipboard clutched like a shield, her eyes narrowed, her envy a sharp undercurrent. But Mariah's focus remained on Noah, her care a beacon that dimmed Lauren's presence. After dinner, as Mariah cleared the plates, a glass slipped from Adrian's hand, shattering on the marble floor. A shard nicked his palm, a thin line of blood welling up. Mariah was at his side in an instant, her canvas bag yielding a small first aid kit. "Hold still," she said softly, her voice a soothing balm. She knelt beside him, her fingers gentle as she cleaned the wound, her touch steady despite the blood. Adrian, unaccustomed to such care, felt his pulse quicken. His gray eyes met her hazel ones, her hair brushed his arm, her closeness a quiet storm that stirred something he thought long buried. "You're good at this," he murmured, his voice low, almost vulnerable. Mariah smiled, wrapping a bandage with precision. "My grandma taught me. Fix the hurt before it grows," she said, her eyes holding his for a moment too long. But even as she spoke, a small voice inside whispered she was only ever meant to clean their messes, not to be part of their lives. The air between them crackled, a silent acknowledgement of something unspoken. Noah, watching from the table, clapped his hands, oblivious to the tension, but thrilled by Mariah's presence. "Mariah Mama fixes everything," he said, his voice small but clear, a testament to her impact. Adrian's chest tightened, gratitude mingling with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. The penthouse, once a monument to loss, was transforming, Mariah's care evident in the rolls on the table, the bandage on his hand, the light in Noah's eyes. Lauren, lingering in the hallway, caught the exchange, her lips thinning, her heels clicking as she retreated, her envy a coiled snake. The dinner ended with Noah yawning, his head resting on Mariah's shoulder as she carried him to bed. Adrian followed, pausing at the doorway, watching as Mariah tucked Noah in, her lullaby a soft echo of amazing grace. The room, once a museum of untouched toys, now felt like a home, the air heavy with possibility. Adrian's hand brushed the bandage, his thoughts a tangle of gratitude and something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. Mariah, rising from Noah's bedside, caught his gaze, her smile a quiet promise. The penthouse's glass walls reflected their silhouettes, a fragile trio against the city's glow, a family forming in the cracks of a broken world. The San Francisco penthouse, perched high above the city's restless pulse, shimmered under the harsh noon light of July. Its glass walls reflected the Pacific's churning waves, but within, a different storm brewed. The marble floors, polished to a mirror's sheen, bore the faint traces of Mariah Simmons's warmth, smudges from cookie dough, a stray daisy petal from the vase she'd placed on the dining table. At 33, Mariah's beauty was a quiet force, her dark skin radiant against the penthouse's sterile elegance, her long glossy hair cascading in waves, her hazel eyes carrying a resilience owned by years of overcoming. Her navy dress, simple yet dignified, clung to her frame as she scrubbed a countertop, her canvas bag resting nearby, holding her notebook of recipes and songs. But the air was thick with tension, the penthouse's newfound warmth under siege by a venom that had simmered for weeks. Lauren Palmer, the penthouse's manager, stood in the kitchen doorway, her blonde bob immaculate, her designer heels clicking like a metronome of malice. At 46, Lauren was a study in calculated control. Her tailored blazer crisp, her clipboard a weapon, her green eyes sharp with envy that had festered since Mariah's arrival. She'd watched Mariah weave joy into the home, her laughter with Noah, her gentle care during that unprecedented dinner, and it gnawed at her. Lauren had long harbored a silent longing for Adrian Whitaker, the billionaire whose grief she mistook for an invitation. Mariah's presence, her beauty, her bond with Noah, Her ease in a space Lauren ruled threatened her carefully curated order. Today, with Adrian away at a conference in Seattle, Lauren saw her chance to strike. Her authority unchallenged, her resentment a coiled snake ready to bite. Mariah, wiping down the stove, sensed the shift in the air, her humming faltering. Lauren stepped forward, her voice low but laced with venom. "You don't belong here," she said, her words cutting through the kitchen's warmth like a blade. "This is a home for class, not charity cases like you." Her eyes raked over Mariah's skin, her dress, her hair, the racial undertone unmistakable, sharp as a slap. Mariah paused, her cloth still in hand, her hazel eyes meeting Lauren's with a calm that belied the sting. "I'm here to do my job," she said softly, her voice steady, but her fingers tightened around the cloth, betraying the hurt beneath her poise. Lauren's lips curled into a sneer, her clipboard tapping against her thigh. "Your job," she mocked, stepping closer, her heels echoing on the marble. "You're a maid, nothing more. Playing mommy to Noah, batting your eyes at Adrian. It's pathetic. This isn't your world." The words were a barrage, each one aimed to wound, to reduce Mariah to an outsider. She gestured at Mariah's canvas bag, its worn edges a stark contrast to the penthouse's opulence. "Pack that sad little bag and leave by tonight, you're done here." The command was final, her tone dripping with triumph, as if she'd reclaimed the penthouse for herself. Mariah's heart sank, a heavy stone in her chest. She loved Noah. His shy giggles, his crayon drawings of her as Mariah Mama, his fragile trust. She cared for Adrian, his quiet gratitude, the way his eyes softened when she bandaged his hand. The penthouse, once cold, had become a home because of her, its walls echoing with laughter she'd kindled. But Lauren's words, laced with prejudice, reminded her of the world's cruelty, the barriers she'd faced her whole life. Her hand brushed her bag, her fingers tracing the notebook inside, its pages filled with songs that had carried her through hardship. She wanted to fight, to stand her ground, but the weight of Lauren's authority, the sting of her bias, pressed against her resolve. She nodded, her expression serene but her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'll go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the words tasting of defeat. Lauren smirked, her heels clicking as she turned away, her victory a cold flame. Mariah moved to the staff room, a small space off the kitchen, and began packing her canvas bag. She folded her apron, her hands trembling, and tucked away the notebook, its cover worn from years of hope. She pulled out a small drawing Noah had slipped into her bag, a stick figure of her, hair flowing, labeled Mariah Mama. Her breath caught, a sob rising as she traced the crayon lines, her heart breaking for the boy she'd come to love. Noah, playing in the living room, sensed the change. His sketchpad lay open, his small hands sketching a new image, Mariah and him in a pillow fort. He wandered to the kitchen, his curls bouncing, and saw Mariah's bag half-packed. His eyes widened, fear flickering across his face. "Mariah Mama," he whispered, his voice a fragile thread, the first words he'd spoken since the song. Mariah knelt, her hair spilling over her shoulders, and pulled him into a hug. "I have to go, sweet boy," she said, her voice cracking, tears spilling down her cheeks. Noah clung to her, his small body shaking, his silence returning as he buried his face in her dress. The penthouse seemed to darken, its glass walls reflecting Mariah's silhouette, a lone figure against the city's indifferent glow. Lauren watched from the hallway, her clipboard clutched like a trophy, her smirk unwavering. Mariah's bag grew heavier, each item a memory, recipe cards, a sprig of rosemary from their balcony garden, Noah's drawing. She stood, her resolve fraying, her love for Noah and Adrian warring with the pain of Lauren's words. The kitchen, once a haven of warmth, now felt like a battlefield, its air thick with the venom of prejudice. Mariah adjusted her bag, her heart a quiet furnace, her steps slow as she moved toward the door, unaware that the tide was about to turn. The San Francisco penthouse, its glass walls catching the fiery hues of a July sunset, stood poised on the edge of upheaval. The marble floors, still warm from Mariah Simmons's gentle touch, bore witness to a brewing storm. Mariah, at 33, stood in the staff room, her navy dress clinging to her frame, her long, glossy hair spilling over her shoulders as she packed her canvas bag. Her dark skin glowed despite the weight of her heartbreak, her hazel eyes glistening with tears. She fought to contain it. Noah's drawing, a stick figure labeled Mariah Mama, lay atop her folded apron, a jagged reminder of the boy she'd come to love. The air was thick with the sting of Lauren's venom, her cruel command to leave echoing in Mariah's ears. The penthouse, so recently a haven, now felt like a cage, its opulence mocking her pain. Noah, the 9-year-old, with his mother's curls and his father's guarded gaze, stood frozen in the doorway, his sketch pad clutched tightly. His small voice, so recently unlocked, trembled as he whispered, "Mariah, Mama, don't go." His eyes, wide with panic, locked onto her bag, his small frame trembling as he stepped closer. Mariah knelt, her hair brushing his cheek, and hugged him tightly, her tears falling silently. "I'm so sorry, sweet boy," she murmured, her voice cracking, her heart splintering as Noah's arms clung to her, his sobs muffled against her dress. The moment was a knife, cutting through the warmth she'd woven into their lives, leaving only the raw ache of loss. Lauren Palmer, the penthouse's manager, stood in the hallway, her blonde bob gleaming under the chandeliers, her designer heels rooted in triumph. Her green eyes glinted with malice, her clipboard held like a scepter of authority. She'd orchestrated this exile, her envy of Mariah's bond with Noah and Adrian fueling her cruelty. "Hurry up," she snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "You're wasting time." Her smirk was a blade, slicing through the fragile hope Mariah had nurtured. The penthouse's silence amplified her words, the city's distant hum a cruel reminder of a world that often judged by color and class. Then the air shifted. A screech of tires echoed from the driveway, the sound piercing the penthouse's stillness. Adrian Whitaker, the 42-year-old billionaire, stormed through the glass doors, his charcoal suit creased from a rushed flight from Seattle. His gray eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to shake the walls, his jaw set like steel. Noah, hearing the commotion, broke free from Mariah's embrace and ran to his father, his small voice raw but clear. "She's making Mariah, Mama, leave," he cried, pointing at Lauren, his curls bouncing, his face streaked with tears. Adrian's gaze snapped to Mariah, her bag half-packed, her eyes red but steady, and something in him broke, a wall of grief crumbling under the weight of his son's words. He strode into the staff room, his presence a thunderclap. Lauren's smirk faltered, her clipboard trembling in her hands. "What's going on here?" Adrian demanded, his voice low but molten, each word a hammer striking iron. Noah clung to his leg, his voice rising. "She's my family." The word family hung in the air, a declaration that shifted the room's gravity. Mariah stood, her bag at her side, her posture real despite her pain. Lauren stammered, her heels clicking nervously. "She's just a housekeeper," she said, her tone defensive, her eyes darting. "She doesn't belong here." Adrian's eyes narrowed, his fury a controlled blaze. "You're fired," he said, his voice cold as the marble beneath them. "Leave my home, now." The words were a guillotine, final and unyielding. Lauren's face drained of color, her clipboard clattering to the floor, her authority shattered. She opened her mouth to protest, but Adrian's glare silenced her. Her heels echoed as she fled, the glass doors swinging shut behind her. Her reign over the penthouse ended in a single breath. Adrian turned to Mariah, his hands trembling, his gray eyes searching hers. The room stilled, the sunset casting their shadows across the marble. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice softer now, thick with emotion. He stepped closer, Noah at his side, and reached into his pocket, pulling out a velvet box. Inside gleamed a sapphire ring, its deep blue catching the light like Mariah's spirit. "Stay with us, Mariah," he said, his voice breaking. "Be our family." He knelt not as a billionaire, but as a man stripped bare, offering his heart. Noah cheered, hugging Mariah's legs, his small voice chanting, "Mariah, Mama stays." Mariah's breath caught, her tears falling, awed, but this time they were tears of hope. She looked at Noah, his curls framing a beaming smile. Then at Adrian, his vulnerability a gift she hadn't expected. Her fingers brushed the ring, its cool metal a promise. "Yes," she whispered, slipping it onto her finger, her voice a melody of resolve. The penthouse, once a tomb, pulsed with life, its glass walls reflecting a new beginning. Adrian rose, his hand finding hers, and in front of Noah he kissed her softly, a seal of their bond. The sunset blazed, a witness to their stand, a family forged in defiance of prejudice. The San Francisco penthouse, its glass walls aglow with the silver light of an August evening, stood as a glittering stage for a reckoning. The ballroom, a cavern of opulence with chandeliers dripping crystal and marble floors polished to a mirror's sheen, buzzed with the murmurs of Adrian Whitaker's elite New York family. The air was thick with the scent of orchids and champagne, but beneath the elegance lay a current of judgment, sharp as a blade. Mariah Simmons at 33 stood at the room's edge, her navy gown flowing like a quiet rebellion against the sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns. Her dark skin shimmered under the lights, her long glossy hair a cascade of defiance, her hazel eyes steady despite the weight of scrutiny. The sapphire ring on her finger, Adrian's promise, gleamed like a shield, but tonight it felt like a target. Adrian, the 42-year-old billionaire, stood beside her, his charcoal suit impeccable, his gray eyes fierce with resolve. His hand rested lightly on Mariah's, a silent vow in a room primed to tear them apart. Noah, 9 years old, with his mother's curls and his father's guarded gaze, clung to Mariah's side, his small hand gripping the hem of her gown. His sketch pad, tucked under his arm, bore a new drawing: Mariah, Adrian, and himself, labeled family in bold crayon. The gala, meant to introduce Mariah as Adrian's fiancée, was a crucible. Its guests, old money aristocrats and society elites, watched her with eyes that cut like glass. Eleanor Whitaker, Adrian's mother, presided over the room like a queen. Her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her pearl necklace a stark emblem of her authority. At 70, her patrician features were carved with disdain. Her voice a velvet whip as she addressed the crowd. "We're here to celebrate family," she said, her eyes sliding to Mariah, "but some choices disappoint." The word landed like a stone, the room's murmurs sharpening into whispers. "A housekeeper," she added, her lips curling as she sipped her champagne, her pearls glinting. "She's not our kind." The guests nodded, their diamonds flashing, their gazes raking Mariah's gown, her skin, her very presence. Mariah stood taller, her hair a crown of resilience, her hand tightening in Adrian's. She'd faced judgment before, whispers in Mississippi diners, sneers in San Francisco's elite circles, but this was a battlefield, the stakes personal. Her heart pounded, but her face remained serene, her hazel eyes locking onto Eleanor's with a quiet challenge. The room's air grew heavy, the chandeliers casting jagged shadows, the champagne flutes clinking like a countdown to conflict. A cousin, Margaret, in a silk gown, leaned toward a guest, her voice carrying, "She's lovely, but out of place. Adrian could do better." The laughter that followed was a blade slicing through Mariah's composure, though her expression never wavered. Noah, sensing the tension, pressed closer to Mariah, his small frame trembling, his eyes wide with fear, darting to the crowd and then back to her. Suddenly, he stepped forward, his voice small but piercing, cutting through the murmurs like a bell. "She's my mom," he shouted, his curls bouncing, his sketch pad raised like a banner. The room froze, glasses pausing mid-sip, whispers dying. Noah's words, born from the silence Mariah had broken, were a thunderclap, his love for her a shield against their scorn. Mariah's breath caught, her eyes glistening, her hand brushing his curls as she fought back tears. Adrian's grip on her hand tightened, his jaw set like steel. He stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice a low growl that silenced the room. "Mariah is my future," he said, his gray eyes blazing as they swept over his family. "She's brought life to this home. To my son, to me. If you can't accept her, you're not welcome here." The words were a guillotine, final and unyielding, severing the ties of tradition. Eleanor's face paled, her pearls seeming to choke her, her champagne flute trembling. Margaret stammered, her silk gown wilting under Adrian's glare. The guests shifted, their whispers now of unease, their power crumbling before his resolve. Mariah's heart swelled, her sapphire ring catching the chandelier's light, a beacon of their bond. She looked at Noah, his small hands still clutching her gown, then at Adrian, his vulnerability and strength intertwined. The ballroom, once a stage for judgment, now felt like a battleground, its opulence dimmed by their unity. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her voice a hiss. "You're throwing away our legacy for her." Adrian's response was swift, his arm encircling Mariah. "She is my legacy," he said, his tone unyielding. Her and Noah. The room's silence was electric, the guests' faces a mix of shock and reluctant awe. The gala continued, but its sheen was tarnished. Eleanor retreated to a corner, her authority fractured. The guests, chastened, avoided Mariah's gaze, their champagne now tasteless. Noah hugged Mariah's legs, his sketch pad open to their family drawing, his smile radiant. Adrian's never left hers, his touch a promise that echoed louder than the crowd's scorn. The penthouse, its glass walls reflecting their silhouettes, stood as a testament to their defiance. A family forged in the face of prejudice, unbowed and unbroken. The San Francisco skyline, kissed by the soft September sunlight, shimmered as if in celebration, its towers bowing to the garden overlooking the Pacific, where Mariah Simmons and Adrian Whitaker stood on the cusp of forever. The garden, tucked behind the penthouse, was a haven of roses and ivy, its air fragrant with late summer blooms, a stark contrast to the sterile marble of their home. Mariah, at 33, was a vision of grace. Her white dress, simple yet luminous, hugged her frame with quiet elegance. Her dark skin glowed against the fabric, her long glossy hair cascading in waves, unbound like her spirit. The sapphire ring on her finger, Adrian's vow, caught the sun's rays, a beacon of their love. Her hazel eyes, bright with joy, held a resilience that had carried her through storms, now softened by hope. Adrian, 42, stood beside her, his charcoal suit tailored but unpretentious, his gray eyes alight with a warmth that had been buried for years. His hand clasped Mariah's, his touch steady, a promise forged in defiance of the world's scorn. Noah, their 9-year-old heart, stood between them, his curls bouncing as he clutched a velvet pillow bearing 2 rings. His grin wide as the ocean beyond, his sketch pad tucked under his arm, bore a new drawing. Mariah in her dress, Adrian in his suit, Noah between them, labeled forever in bold crayon. The crowd was small. Adrian's loyal staff, Mariah's childhood friends from Mississippi, a few colleagues who'd seen her light, but their cheers were a symphony, drowning out the whispers of a judgmental world. The ceremony was a tapestry of love, woven with simple vows and profound truths. Mariah spoke first, her voice clear, a melody that echoed the hymn she'd sung to Noah. "You and Noah gave me a home," she said, her eyes locked on Adrian's, her hand brushing Noah's curls. "I promise to love you fiercely, to build a family that shines through any storm." Adrian's voice, usually clipped in boardrooms, trembled with emotion. "You brought us back to life, Mariah," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I vow to stand by you, to make every day a song." Noah, his small voice bold, chimed in, "Mariah, Mama, you're my forever." The crowd laughed, tears in their eyes as the officiant smiled, pronouncing them a family under the garden's golden light. The kiss that sealed their vows was soft but certain, Adrian's lips meeting Mariah's as Noah giggled, hugging their legs. The garden erupted in applause, roses trembling in the breeze, the ocean's waves a quiet witness to their triumph. Mariah lifted Noah, his arms around her neck, and Adrian's hand found hers, their silhouettes a portrait against the sunset. The penthouse, visible through the garden's edge, no longer loomed as a mausoleum, but glowed with possibility, its glass walls reflecting their joy. The reception was intimate, a wooden table laden with Mariah's peach cobbler, a nod to her grandmother, and a playlist of soulful hymns that filled the air with warmth. Yet the world beyond the garden whispered its dissent. Society pages, still stinging from the gala fallout, printed snide columns, "Billionaire weds housekeeper," their words dripping with disdain. Online forums buzzed, their venom targeting Mariah's skin, her origins, her audacity to rise. But within the garden, those voices were distant echoes, drowned by the laughter of friends, the clink of glasses, the joy of a family forged in love. Noah danced with Mariah, his small feet on hers, his giggles a melody that rivaled any hymn. Adrian watched, his heart full, his grief a shadow burned away by their light. The penthouse, transformed by Mariah's touch, was now a true home. The kitchen, once sterile, bore traces of their life, cookie crumbs, a jar of rosemary from their balcony garden, and Noah's drawings pinned to the fridge. The living room, where the pillow fort still stood, echoed with Noah's chatter, his voice a daily miracle. Adrian, once a ghost in his own life, lingered longer at home, his BlackBerry forgotten as he read to Noah or held Mariah's hand. The dining table, where they'd shared their first meal, now hosted nightly dinners, Mariah's laughter weaving through their conversations, her care a thread binding them together. The challenges remained: society's sneer, the elite's scorn, the occasional letter from Adrian's family, their words cold with disapproval. But Mariah, Adrian, and Noah faced them as one, their bond, a fortress. Mariah's canvas bag, now a symbol of her journey, sat on the counter, holding new recipes and Noah's latest sketches. She taught Noah to bake, her hands guiding his, her voice singing softly as they worked. Adrian, watching from the doorway, felt his heart expand, his love for them a fire no prejudice could extinguish. As the wedding day faded, the trio returned to the penthouse, the city's lights winking through the windows. Mariah tucked Noah into bed, his forever drawing now framed above his desk. Adrian joined her, his arm around her waist, their reflections a family in the glass. The penthouse, once a monument to loss, was now a haven, its walls alive with their story. Mariah's white dress hung in their room, a symbol of their beginning, her sapphire ring glinting as she smiled. They faced the world's judgment not with anger but with grace, their love a beacon, their family a testament to what endures. What a journey Mariah, Adrian, and Noah have taken us on, from silence to song, from judgment to love. What moved you most? Was it Noah's first words, Mariah's resilience, or their unbreakable bond? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your reflections. A huge thank you for joining us in this tale of triumph. Your presence brings these stories to life. Hit that subscribe button to catch our next unforgettable journey and share where you're watching from. Let's keep spreading stories of hope and courage. Until next time, stay inspired, and we'll see you soon.